Okay, so welcome everybody, and thank you for coming along this evening. Thank you for zooming in for this talk. I'm Emily Spraggan. I'm Nature Recovery Officer at Devon Wildlife Trust. I work to develop projects with partners within the city and sometimes elsewhere in the county. I've worked in Exeter for many years now on projects under the Exeter Wild City banner. That's included things like tree planting with communities, the Exeter Swift project, and developing meadow corridors across the city with the City Council. And now I have the pleasure of working with partners on finding ways to improve Exeter's waterways. In a nutshell, this project is a long-term aspiration to work across the city of Exeter to achieve more natural waterways, to reduce flooding, enhance biodiversity and improve water quality. It's an ambitious project dealing with some fairly complicated issues, but improving our waterways is obviously vitally important. And all aspirations start somewhere, and this one begins in the Northbrook, which is arguably the water body with the greatest number of challenges out of the 6 in the city. So the majority of this presentation focuses on this one stream. Just to give you a quick overview of what we'll cover, so we'll look at the project as a whole, the Naturalising Exeter's Waterways, which is talking about the citywide, looking at all the streams in the city, why we're now looking at the Northbrook, where it is, the issues it faces, and what we've done so far, what the opportunities have been identified, and the challenges, and then how we move forward and deliver change. And then at the end, we'll deal with some of the questions that you might have. So Naturalising Exeter's Waterways, that's sort of the wider project that we're looking at across Exeter. It's a partnership project between the City Council, the Environment Agency, Devon County Council, ourselves at Devon Wildlife Trust and South West Water. And it's about enhancing the brooks running into the River Exe. So we've got the Tadderford, the Pin, Northbrook, Alfing Brook, Mapford, and the Nadder that leads into the Alfing Brook as well. It's about improving the water quality running through those. It's about reducing flood risk along the path of the rivers and improving their wildlife value and creating spaces that can be enjoyed by the communities around them. To date, the project has been funded by the Environment Agency, Natural England, Devon County Council, the East Devon Catchment Partnership, and then a fair bit of time and kind from all those in the partnership. The map that's shown on this screen is the biodiversity reference map in Exeter, something that's been produced by the Devon Biodiversity Records Centre. And it shows the river and the streams that run into it in that nice bright blue. And then it shows sort of the different levels of protected habitat in the city. So the purple is the most protected. It's habitats of principal importance. So that's things like sites of special scientific interest, county wildlife sites, special protected areas. So you can see lots of funny lines at the top. That's things like the hedges and the woodlands up in the north of Exeter. Then you've got that dark green sort of zones, which are important habitats, but don't quite meet the habitats of principal important status. So it's sort of semi-improved grassland, broadleafed woodland, and the watercourses. And then you've got the sort of lighter green stuff there, which is more the sort of woodland plantations, amenity grasslands like parks and open spaces. So there's more formal landscapes. And really, this is just a really useful tool that anyone can access. It's on the Exeter Wild City Facebook page if you want to have a look at it and use it. And it's a really good way for us within the trust as well to sort of use to see where we can create connections around the city, where there are spaces, where there are gaps, and where there are opportunities. So of the brooks in Exeter, we decided to focus on the Northbrook, which is runs through 4 parks managed by Devon Wildlife Trust, which obviously helps us quite significantly in terms of permissions. It stretches all the way from farmland up in the north of the city through Mincing Lake Valley Park, Ludwell Valley Park, Northbrook Park, and into Riverside Valley Park. It's about 7.5 kilometres long. You can see on the map on the left-hand side of your screen the catchment, which is about 10.5 kilometres squared, which equates to about 40,000 people living in that area. There's some good species of note within the Northbrook. We have kingfisher, otter. There's been a record of water shrew up in the north of the catchment, which is really exciting. And you do get eel in the water in the Northbrook as well. Historically, there's been far more variety of species. There's even been water voles in the Northbrook in the past. There's been trout, bats, including greater horseshoe bats that have been known to use the river corridor and then move up the Northbrook. But really, there could be a lot more using this stream. The water shrew present in the upper catchment is really encouraging because they are known to be sensitive to pollution, and they need very dense bankside vegetation, which you obviously don't get so much of in an urban environment, and enough aquatic invertebrates to feed them. So they're quite similar to water voles in that sense. So it's really encouraging that there has been a record of them, but we'd definitely like to try and help improve the population. So on to the challenges that the Northbrook faces. So like most urban waterways, the Northbrook is heavily modified and experiences some pretty hideous pollution problems. A third of the Northbrook is either underground or in a concrete or canalised channel. And the vast majority of the stream has been sort of straightened, concreted, deepened, all in an effort really to force water downstream as quickly as possible. So the photos that you've got there, we've got a culvert in the middle going underground. On the left-hand side is an example of that canalised or concrete channels that you see quite often along the Northbrook. And then on the right-hand side, although it looks really nice as nicely vegetated, it's quite heavily incised, which means that it's the channel's been deepened and it's very far away from the floodplain to the right, so that you can just about see in the corner. So the Northbrook experiences some rapid flooding due to the incised channels. So again, that's where the channel has been carved low into the ground and has very steep banks. And this incised nature is partly due to the manipulated channel profile, so where it's been straightened through cement channels, and it's partly exacerbated by erosion of the channel bed. So where the water's shooting through as quickly as possible, it's taking the sediment away with it, and so those channels get deeper and deeper and deeper, and then become even further away from the floodplains. And we'll talk a lot about the importance of floodplains during this talk. So the loss of natural floodplains, the change in channel profile and the habitats, or lack of habitats such as marshes and reed beds and wet woodlands, those sort of natural habitats that you'd associate with wetland and waterways, they just aren't there. And then about 75% of the catchment is urban, so which obviously means there's a lot of rainfall passing really quickly over hard surfaces and into the Northbrook, and none of that's being filtered by soil, it's just going directly into the water, which means that there's a real rapid response to rainfall, so you get more flooding and pretty poor water quality as well. These sections just show some more examples really of those steep sides and really kind of straight, unnatural features that we see along the along the Northbrook. I think these are partly along Wanford and along Hamlin playing fields, and again through Ludwell. So it just means that there's no connection to the floodplain. There's no natural habitats really. There's not a great deal of riparian vegetation to help prevent water passing through. Then essentially it's all just about getting that water to the Exe as quickly as possible. So in a natural river environment, you find that a stream meanders, it's got deeper pools, it's got riffles and runs, which will provide that variety of depth and water speeds to suit different invertebrates and fish life. You'd get reed beds, ponds, wet woodland, water meadows, which help to slow down the flow. And you'd get a floodplain, which would provide that sort of physical space for water to spread out to reduce flash flooding. And you'd also get natural vegetated banks that would help to stabilise the soil and provide shelter for small mammals, amphibians and reptiles. And in the vast majority of the Northbrook and in many urban streams, you're not getting those natural features. So here are some of the more issues that you experienced in Northbrook. So the Northbrook runs under or beside 3 former landfill sites, which means that particularly after heavy rain, the stream suffers from leachates coming through from those landfills, and you sometimes see the stream south of Mincing Lake looking the colour of that photo on the left after really heavy rain. There's also this middle photo shows a combined sewage overflow outflow pipe. So there are 12 of these combined sewer overflows, or CSOs, discharging into the Northbrook, which essentially has unfiltered surface water and raw sewage sometimes coming into the stream after heavy rainfall. So our sewage systems take both domestic sewage from households and surface water from drains, and normally all of that's piped away to sewage treatment works like down at Countess Weir. When the surface water volumes are too great, so after there's been a storm or really heavy rain, the capacity of those sewage pipes is just exceeded. It can't take all of that water, and so it ends up being discharged through these CSOs. And you can see everything that comes through it, everything that gets flushed down the toilet, everything comes through and gets trapped and ends up in the water. And obviously it contains untreated sewage, which is a real health hazard. It's unsightly and damaging to the environment, and ultimately finds its way into the highly sensitive waters of our internationally important estuary, which is also failing to meet its water quality targets. In addition to the sewage pipe system, there's also drainage pipes that take surface water to streams and rivers. So this is more just water flowing from our roads and things. But however, there's a big problem with misconnections of wastewater pipes from people's homes into these drains. So sometimes when people are doing works to their bathrooms or to putting new kitchens in, new pipe work coming through into the gardens and into the street will often be misconnected, and they'll go into these water pipes rather than into the sewage pipe systems. And this then goes straight into our streams. So it's probably perhaps more damaging, or the most damaging chronic pollution source for the Northbrook, because it impacts are felt every day. So every time a toilet's flushed or a washing machine's turned on or the showers run, and it affects and it all just goes straight into the stream. So the phosphates that this pollution typically introduces to the stream are really damaging for the ecosystem. But it is something that can be dealt with and improved. So opportunities, where we have so many challenges, there are of course many ways to improve it, and there are lots of ways we can try and look at trying to improve the Northbrook, which is a really exciting way of looking at it. There's a real chance of creating new habitats and wetlands to support existing wildlife and to aim to help the return of lost species, so things like trout and water voles. There's the opportunity to improve water quality, to tackle flood risk by slowing down the flow and increasing temporary storage during high rain, allowing the stream to sort of respond more naturally by connecting it back with its floodplain. So currently the aim of the Northbrook is to keep it clear and get everything to the river as soon as possible. But what needs to happen is to allow natural features to take on that water, to slow it down across floodplains with vegetation, so that it doesn't just send one big hit of water down after heavy rain. We've got a chance now to leave the Northbrook healthier, functioning more naturally, richer in wildlife, and more attractive for people. So creating a real source of pride and a connection to Exeter's nature, and that's even more pride than I've already witnessed in the communities that neighbour the Northbrook. And of course, thinking about the larger Naturalising Exeter Waterways project, there's lessons to be learned in this project and how we can tackle issues around the rest of the city. So what have we done to date, and where are we now? So back in 2021, we did this first report, the first stage feasibility study, which identified issues, opportunities, and some initial possible solutions. And this was based on interviews with a range of key stakeholders, so the Environment Agency, engineers at the City Council, the Wild Trout Trust, the experts in the flood teams at Devon County Council, South West Water, the University of Exeter, Devon Wildlife Trust. So we could really get an idea of sort of some of the issues and opportunities. In 2022, we did the next stage feasibility and got consultants to review the opportunities and identify those with the most potential, and then to prioritise those options. So 10 options were identified, plus a few in-stream additions as well. I think I've got a picture of that as well. So that picture just shows there's all those orange blobs are sort of some of those option areas where we could do improvements. So as I've mentioned before, the current channel is all about moving water as quickly as possible downstream, which leads to flooding, loss of sediment, and destruction of any natural habitat. And each of the options that we've considered within that report is essentially about creating the opposite of the current situation. So it's about slowing the flow, providing space for water to spread to when it's needed, and so allowing the channel to develop more naturally. And this will all allow water habitats to form where they're appropriate and of benefit to the Northbrook. So some of the options suggested in that second stage feasibility report include things like water storage solutions, river realignments, daylighting underground sections, wetland creation, bank regrading. And these may not all be practical. For example, daylighting, where you're literally taking an underground section of the channel and opening it up. It might be hugely impractical, but it's a starting point, and it's where we might have the best chance of improving this the Northbrook. And here are just a few examples that came out of that report. So that middle diagram in there with the series of pictures shows how log jams can work. So where you've got stretches of those incised channels, those really deep channels that are just getting deeper and deeper through erosion, and where they have got some connection to the floodplain, you can place logs in the channel. And that will have two impacts. So partly it will force water into the floodplain to slow the flow. And then secondly, it will also collect silt. So all that soil that's sort of disappearing down the stream, it will start to build up behind those logs. And it will raise the channel bed. And that helps to force the water into the floodplain. And this effect of the water entering the floodplain means that you're kind of creating this braided effect with several smaller channels forming and meandering and reconnecting, and allowing the water to find its preferred route that allows change and allows the quantity of water allows change depending on the quantity of water that's flowing through. So it's providing flexibility and options rather than it has to go down this one channel as fast as possible. So by creating this more natural habitat. So that's a really good option in some of the areas that we're looking at. Those two images on the bottom left. So that's sort of that kind of reflects the sort of canalised areas we've got. So if you think in areas, some in Mincing Lake, some along Ludwell, sort of along the near Wanford playing fields, are these sort of concreted channels. In some of those areas, it might be really hard to do anything about that. We can't. It might be restricted by housing, by roads. There are other factors that might influence what can be done. So if we can't get rid of that sort of cement channel, then there's an option of using these things called deflectors and baffles, which are essentially things that you bolt into the base of the channel. And they start to collect sediment where you then can get vegetation growing, and it also produces sort of areas of slow flow and fast flow. So you're starting to create different habitats within those small areas of stream for different wildlife. And then the other two photos there show sort of options for realigning channels and bank regrading. So large areas of the Northbrook are encroached by really steep slopes, and that restricts where the water can go during heavy rainfall events. But by regrading the banks and reconnecting the channels with the floodplain, it just provides that space for a more natural stream system to develop. And this allows natural features to develop, such as reed beds, which is a really good option. And all of these will hopefully encourage riparian vegetation, so creating vegetation that could grow in the stream and alongside it, and you can either let that happen naturally or do some planting or sowing seed or plug planting suitable species along the banks and the floodplains to really help create that natural habitat. So after that 2022 study, we decided to focus on two options that looked to be the most deliverable. So they had greatest impact, and we had some ownership over the land, so that helps to make things a bit easier. And these were in the top of the catchment around Mincing Lake Valley Park. So the images you've got here, you've got sort of Mincing Lake Valley Park on the left-hand side there, running along the sort of left-hand side of that green space, and that circled area at the top is shown on the right-hand side. So that's the very northern section of Mincing Lake Valley Park, above Stoke Hill. So the first option we were looking at was a storage pond that would hold water in the upper catchment, but the modelling work that was done by our contracted engineers showed that this would actually have very little impact on flooding downstream. It may just be that it was too high in the catchment. It wasn't going to produce enough of an impact. So we decided not to go ahead with that option. The second option is for realignment and habitat creation project within that upper reaches, so within that circled area in Mincing Lake. So DWT manages Mincing Lake Valley Park on behalf of Exeter City Council, so we're in a really good position to develop habitats in that area. You might be able to just about see it. So on that right hand side picture, and at the bottom you can see there's a parking area. For those who know Mincing Lake, that's the northern car park for Mincing Lake Valley Park. You then cross the road over Stoke Hill and you can see the footpath that runs all the way along. That's that sort of green strip that then stops at the woodland edge at the top. That's the sort of section we're looking at, and currently the stream runs along the left-hand boundary of Mincing Lake there. So yeah, currently the stream runs along the sort of western border, and it's got a really steep bank to the west up alongside, so it sort of butts up against residential housing on that side. And there's a culvert at the southern boundary that goes under Stoke Hill and then goes underground. And the stream is mainly canalised. It's pretty heavily incised, so again that sort of deeper channel, and it's got very little natural features. And then it has this open meadow to the east, with a really nice broadleaf woodland slope that's not in DWT ownership. And in this area, we've definitely got brown hair streaks. This is where the water shrew was recorded, the single water shrew on the whole of Northbrook. Which gives us, really a species that we should focus on for this project. So what have we done to date? So there has been some work going on over the last year or so. So we've worked with contractors and with an engineering consultant to start working on drawings for what could be done in this area. So the guys on the right here are doing topographic surveys to get the lie of the land. The guys on the left there are doing trial pits and soil testing just to see, hopefully there's no shockers under there. We're not going to find an extra landfill or find that there's, the soils are damaged or polluted. So we've started to do that sort of survey. We've done hydrological modelling for the area and for the options that we've looked at so far, just to see what impact that will have downstream. And we've done some ground conditioning depth studies, so things like looking for utilities, so just that we've got all the information that we need to know about this area before we start doing anything and thinking about how we move forward. And there's been water quality surveys and various collating survey data from other surveys that have been done in this area, although further surveys will be needed for this whole stretch to make sure that we've got all the information we need and all the information that we need to be able to compare and monitor, so that we can see the difference that this work might do in the future. So those photos on the right, I think hopefully I've not got this completely wrong. You can see a mayfly nymph in the centre of that picture, and some water shrimp. I might have that wrong. And then on the twig down the bottom, that's a green hair streak egg on a bit of blackthorn. They're absolutely minute. Okay, so what have we got here? So here we have sort of the northern reach of Mincing Lake Valley Park above Stoke Hill. So again, it's just showing where it is. So that left-hand photo is kind of roughly what it looks like at the moment on what we're looking at. And then the image on the right, it's not an accurate representation of of the current design or the things that we're looking at. It's really just an artistic impression of the kind of habitat we're looking to create at this site. So it's not an accurate representation, but it just helps to give us an idea of what it could look like in the future. So the sort of features that we're hoping to introduce in this section are a new channel at the low point of the meadow. So currently the channel is on one side of the meadow of the field, and then you've got this big open meadow. And what we're hoping to do is sort of re-landscape that and create a far more gentle V shape. So there'll be a lot of sort of soil shifting and bringing the channel away from the border and bringing it more centrally into the floodplain so that it's more effective. Introducing gravel to provide those in-stream features and different depths and bank heights to provide a variety of habitats and opportunities for wildlife. Yeah, I mentioned the landscaping to connect the stream with the floodplain, so creating a far more natural shape and actually having a proper functioning floodplain, and taking the stream away from where it currently sits against that hard boundary. There'll be the development of ponds and scrapes and reed beds and a sort of more naturalised riverbanks. So it'll be far more vegetated, providing shelter for species such as reptiles and small mammals like water shrews and water voles. And how amazing would it be to think that we might have water voles in the city in our lifetime? I mean, I can't imagine it, but this sort of work is what would perhaps create the habitat for water shrew and water voles, which is fantastic. It would be thinking about creation of riffles and runs to create variety in water flow and depth. So within the stream, creating features that mean that you have faster water, slower water, different depths, and that just creates that diversity that provides spaces within the stream for different stages of insect and fish life cycle. So it's not just all about having one sort of uniform depth. There'll be a new footpath which will run through the site. So one thing that's different on it, one thing on this map that definitely isn't correct is that we currently have these two bridges that connect to Stoke Meadow Close, and they will be retained. So the new path will be connected to those two current bridges. There's no plans to get rid of those. It'll just be a new path running through so that people can enjoy the new habitat. And one of the important additions to this, the most recent design we're working on, is an extension of the combined sewage overflow. So currently about 2/3 of the way down that stretch, there is a CSO that pumps into the stream during heavy water incidences. And to deal with that and to make sure that we're not having that pumping into this near pristine habitat that we're hoping to create, we're hoping to have an extension of the CSO so it goes all the way down to the culvert and under Stoke Hill, just so ensure that the stream and the new stream and the new habitat we're creating isn't damaged by it. And we're also working with authorities to deal with the misconnections. So hopefully these two last elements will really help to improve the water quality of this stretch and ensure that there's a better chance of protecting the new habitat that's being created. Okay, here's a view looking south or downriver. So the stream currently runs along the right-hand side of these pictures and of the photo, sorry, and it's far lower than the surrounding meadows, so you can't see it there. It's just sort of in the shadows on the right. And even though there is essentially a floodplain there, it's just of no use as it's far higher than the Northbrook. And the illustration here again isn't an accurate representation, but really provides an idea of what it could look like. So the valley will be deepened to create that more natural soft V with a steeper slope up to the current boundary with neighbouring properties. The stream will be brought further east away from the boundary, and the planned channel will be created with scrapes and ponds. But the idea is that there is a space for the stream to eventually form its own route. So, what might be created there might not work. It might end up meandering a bit more off to the left or right, who knows? It's about providing that option. It's unlikely to look as wet as that picture perhaps suggests, although it may do after heavy rain. But the idea is that there is capacity within the space to become quite wet, and that's the whole point of providing that space. For the vast majority of the year, it might be quite dry, but there will be times when it can store that water and provide that wetland area. And one element of this illustration that definitely won't be delivered is that sort of boardwalk effect is on the paths and over the bridges, because this stretch is used by horse riders, so boardwalks wouldn't be suitable. So the path would be ensuring that really is a suitable pathway for everyone to use. And this photo is looking north from near Stoke Hill. So again, this stream currently runs, so on this one, the stream is on the left-hand side of the picture, and we're sort of looking upstream, and it runs along that left-hand side, and we'd be talking about bringing it further into the valley, sort of deepening that valley channel, and then it would return back to where the stream currently is, up near the culvert. I think what these photos really show is that there's a lot of grass running along the centre of this project area. It's often quite boggy in the winter. It's well used by walkers along the path, but it's essentially sort of an underutilised space, really, that green area. And that space that should be providing a floodplain function, and it isn't. So what this illustration says to me is that our aspirations intend to sort of bring greater diversity to this stretch of the stream. So there'll be more plant life, more colour, more texture, sort of a greater difference in vegetation height, more things to spot and enjoy as you walk along. And then this new habitat will provide space for a greater variety of birds, amphibians, reptiles, small mammals, insect life. Yeah, I don't know, you can kind of imagine walking down this new path with an egret wading along the edge of the shallow pond, sound of reed warblers, from the rushes, and dragonflies darting from leaf to leaf. I don't know. When I look at that, I can really sort of see what might happen here, and it's really exciting in my mind. It sort of certainly helps to sort of push through some of the difficulties of delivering some of this project, having that in my mind as well. So it's worth just saying that this way of looking at naturalising waterways, this is something that's happening across the country, and in some areas we're looking at it in different ways, sort of renaturalising through use of beavers. Obviously, we're doing a lot of that in Devon, and it's happening more across England and Scotland and Wales now. But there are examples all over where authorities are renaturalising rivers and streams for the benefits that we're looking at. So, you know, flood alleviation and water quality, and biodiversity gain, and creating attractive spaces for people. So the nearest to us actually is down on the Riverside Valley. So these images on the left are from where they were doing the works on the overflow channel near Trews Weir. So unfortunately, I haven't got an image of what it used to look like beforehand, but some people might remember that pre-2014, as you went over that bridge, over that overflow channel, there were these two sort of deep, really deep channels that just went straight down towards the river, down by Salmon Pool Weir. And my lasting memory of those actually is one of my old dogs falling into one of them and coming out actually absolutely stinking of really disgusting sort of rotten mud. They weren't particularly pleasant, it has to be said. So works were done as part of the Environment Agency's Exeter flood alleviation works to create a far more natural space and a better space for storing water. So I think between 2014 and 16, works were done to deepen the whole channel, to create a more natural meandering stream. You can just about see it in that top left picture where they've started to create a meandering stream and some back ponds. And then the left, you can see as it's starting to develop once the footpath went in. So it's just one of the best things about this is there's far more consistent flow coming through here now because it's far deeper. So it's far more functional as a flood alleviation channel, but it's also a functioning wildlife habitat and a really attractive space, and which is fantastic. And the picture on the right is kind of what it looked like a few years ago now, but every year you go down there now, it just seems to be getting greener and more reeds and rushes and purple loosestrife popping up, and we're seeing things like egrets and redshanks coming through, and water rails and widgeons. There's all sorts of waders coming into that space now. Considering how well utilised it is by people, it's fantastic that there's so much there. So looking ahead to this with this project, where we're going, We've still got quite a lot of work to do before we can deliver this one option up in the north of Northbrook. And then, of course, there's thinking about all the other options that we could do on that stream. There's a fair bit of fundraising to do. So we're looking at hopefully finding funding through the Environment Agency's Water Environment Improvement Fund. There's the upcoming Southwest Water Restoration Fund. We've got the Biodiversity Net Gain now, where you can get where there may be potential funding through developers. So there's lots of options. It's just you know, a job to get that fundraising in place. There's still an awful lot of work to do in terms of seeking permissions and permits. So things like land drainage consent and planning permission, CSO extension permits, habitat and species licensing, flood risk assessments, all sorts of things that still need to be put in place. So there's sort of a lot of real admin work that needs to be done. There's lots of surveys that still need to be done. So river habitat surveying, ecological surveying, more water quality surveys. So the more of that we have, obviously we know what condition it's in now, so that we'll have something to compare it to later on down the line. Excuse me. In terms of delivery, well, it's still quite much, there's still a question mark over that. It'd be fantastic to think we could do it in the next couple of years. That the one section up at Mincing Lake. But it just depends on, you know, all that admin we were talking about and fundraising. There's still a lot to deal with before we think before we can sort of pinpoint a date that we can start to deliver such a project. And we need to think about monitoring, thinking about citizen science opportunities such as Riverfly, and how we do the ongoing monitoring. So it's really important that we record it as we go along, before and after, to show what, well, hopefully show a really huge increase in wildlife and species that will be introduced into this space. It's a really important part of what we need to do. And then, of course, thinking about where do we go next? So we've started up in the northern catchment. Do we carry on working our way down, kind of strategically down the stream, and think about some of the sort of those smaller deflector baffle ideas that we can do in those cemented channels? Or do we think about doing something like we're doing in Mincing Lake on a slightly larger scale down at Ludwell or Northbrook Park? There's some real options there that we can do. We need to think about where we move next, and hopefully we'll just keep on learning from what we've been doing up in Mincing Lake. The picture there is another one of the artistic impressions that we had done by Richard Carman, and it shows what could be done in Ludwell. So this is it's just we've done no work in Ludwell Valley part of the options report so far. So this just really gives you an idea of what we could sort of think to develop in those areas. It's just another nice way of looking at how it might look in the future. So. It's worth pointing out as well with all of these that, you know, these are really long-term aspirations, and it takes a long time to put these sorts of things into place. So to think about those 10 options that we've got starting up in the north of Northbrook all the way down to Northbrook Park, it could take, you know, we're looking at decades of work and funding and collaborations and partnership. There's no sort of quick fix to any of these. It's a lot of work that needs to go into it, but you have to start somewhere and you know, and try and go as far as you can with it, and hopefully the further down we go with the stream, it'll get easier, and we'll start to see that greater impact as the further down with stream we go. So greater flood alleviation and better water quality and more wildlife coming in. So it's really exciting, but worth noting that it's definitely a long-term project. Right. I think we are at a point where I can answer a few questions. So I'm just going to open up the chat bit so I can see everything. Right, let's have a look. So there's plenty of, I mean, there are a lot of questions here. We've got a little while, so it's okay. But just to let you know that we will send up a follow-up email to everyone with a link to the recordings and an opportunity to email us again with further questions. So if we don't get through everything, please do get back to us after that email, and we'll try and deal with everything. But just so you don't feel disappointed if we don't deal with all the questions this evening. So let's start with some of the ones that are coming through. So are there examples of other areas where this has been done, which you have learnt from? So yes, so I gave obviously the example that we have in down by the river valley in Exeter is one, but there are, Salisbury's got a great example of one. There's one of work being done there. There's one Hampshire, the Hampshire Avon. There's a really good example there of where it's being done. I went up to see a fantastic example up at Exmoor a few weeks ago at Holnacott National Trust property. They're doing incredible things with huge, great, massive trees to influence the channel and to spread out the floodplain. And it's really just inspirational, some of the work that's being done elsewhere in the country. So there's loads of examples out there, and we're definitely sort of learning from those and getting in contact with them and working with our working wetlands team up in the north of Devon, who are also doing similar works and have a huge range of expertise in this area. So yeah, we're definitely looking at other examples around the country and trying to learn from them, and hopefully we'll be able to provide some learning from ours as well for those for other projects around the country. And I think I'm meeting with someone in Teignbridge soon to talk about what they're doing there as well. So they're popping up everywhere, this sort of project. Right, next question. What was the purpose of straightening the river? So yeah, I mean, yeah, the River Exe is straightened all the way through Exeter. All of the brooks are completely straightened. Everything has been heavily manipulated. I'd be surprised if, you know, any more than 5% of any of those streams are still in their natural format. I think really it's all to do with development and roads and housing. And, you know, if the stream or the river's has been in the wrong place for development to take place beforehand, then it gets moved and it gets canalized and it gets forced into different routes. So it's very unusual and unlikely to see sort of those natural meandering streams and rivers certainly through urban environments. But yeah, all of the Northbrook will have been completely straightened and manipulated purely for development, for housing, for roads and the like. And the vast, you know, the huge sections of it that are completely covered over. I still find that quite hard to get my mind around, that so much of it is underground, and that's quite normal. Yeah, it's just to make it easier for development, really. Okay, I've got. So I'm just going to read these in order from. So the Northbrook proposals look great. The sketches are really powerful to show the vision for the scheme. It would be brilliant to see the section through Ludwell enhanced as the next stage. Yeah, it would be great. There's already dippers and grey wagtails and sandpipers in that stretch. Oh, that's really good to hear as well. It's nice to hear people's wildlife sightings in this area. That might be something that we might have to try and look at in the future, is how people can share that information with us. So I think, yeah, that was more of a comment than a question, but that's really interesting. Thank you. And yeah, it's good to hear support for where we might work next. Is there any evidence of beavers coming into the Northbrook, or evidence of beaver activity nearby? So yeah, there has been beaver activity around Exeter. So there was one months ago now in the canal, and then that ended up in the river, and then it sort of disappeared, and we're not really sure where it came from. We were kind of assuming it's come down from the Otter and comes along the coast to us, but that's quite unusual because beavers usually end up dying when they get to salt water. They can't cope with it for very long. So, but that's the only real example of thought that we've had with that one. There has been some evidence of beaver activity recently in Minerva Country Park near Pinbrook, which is interesting, and whether that's come through the Clist or come over maybe it's the one that we had in the Exe. I'm not too sure, but yeah, there has been very occasional beaver sightings around Exeter, and to be honest, we should probably get used to that, because at some point there will be beavers in most rivers in Devon, hopefully in England and Wales, everywhere. So I would definitely recommend not planting apple trees next to the river, just in case we do end up with beavers one day. It's something to consider. Right. Let's have a look for some more questions. That's a good question. We've got, sorry, I'm reading and trying to. So someone's asked, about the pipes running into the streams, so the misconnections that I mentioned coming from bathrooms and kitchens not being fitted properly. So how can that be dealt with short term to stop sewage pollutions getting worse? It's a really good question and a really tricky one to deal with. So we've been talking with South West Water and Exeter City Council about how we can deal with that, particularly in Mincing Lake. There is a way of reporting it to South West Water on their website, and they can investigate it, and they have started looking at it in Mincing Lake. There are ways of doing it. It does sometimes, I think one of the ways that they do it, they do need the cooperation of everyone in the area to help figure out where it's coming from, which of course can be quite tricky. But in terms of the short term, it's really hard to figure out how you deal with that. It's more a case of, it's of really trying to get on it as quickly as possible with the authorities, and try and find out where it's coming from as quickly as possible. If it's a recent thing that's happened, then sometimes it can be easier because it's often known where there is, where work's being done to houses, and so it can be dealt with straight away. That's the best time to do it if it's starting to happen. But of course, you've got to actually notice that happening. Where often it's after there's that accumulation that people notice after a while. And it won't always be noticed in streams where people aren't walking along all the time. So yeah, it's a real issue that needs to be dealt with. Okay, do any of the priorities identified look at the arm of the Northbrook that comes down from Beacon Heath? That's a good question too. So yeah, there's this whole extra section. I wonder if I can go back to the, I might very quickly just go back to the, I don't know if I can I go back to the options image? Oh, there it is. So in there, well, no, it doesn't really show that section. The biggest bit is looking, so in parts of Mincing Lake and the land north of it, it's more about land management rather than looking at the other. I've lost my questions now, they've disappeared. There we go. Yeah, there's not much, there's not, yeah, in the options report doesn't specifically identify anything in that small section beyond being incorporated within that sort of larger land management advice, because there are some large areas in there which haven't been developed yet. So there may be an opportunity to influence development in that section, I suppose. But no, not specifically. But there's no reason why some of these couldn't be no, I'm just going to say no. In that section, there haven't been anything specifically added. Okay, has the Northbrook plan included future impacts of climate change? So within the modelling work that's been done to date, and that's again just on the options that we've looked at so far, part of that modelling was looking at flood events. So looking at things in, we talk about one in storm events, like 1 in 30 years, 1 in 50 years, 1 in 100-year events, which is obviously a really big event. We've looked at those that modelling with that in that context, and also we on top of that included with a percentage increase of impact of climate change. So yes, in terms of thinking about flooding and the impact of climate change, we have thought about that. And so that means that then we could go back and sort of rejig the designs if needs be. And so far with the work that we've suggested up in Mincing Lake, that it's not showing any negative impact, even with climate change and those larger 1 in 100-year events and the like. So we are considering that. And the further down the stream we go, that will become more apparent as well, as it becomes more restricted and restrained. We have to really consider the impacts of flooding. Okay. Oh, this is a nice big one. What opportunities will there be for young people to get involved, please? So, so volunteering opportunities tend to be mostly during the week, during normal working hours, which makes it difficult for many young people to get involved. That's true. I'd like to gain more experience with conducting surveys and doing monitoring, but trying to find opportunities that fit around a PGCE course is limited. Would it be possible to put more volunteering events on evenings and weekends where possible, please? This would help more people be able to get involved. That's a very good point, really. We do have a lot of volunteering opportunities, but they are sometimes limited or restricted to work days. which restricts who can do it. In Exeter, we have a programme with youth rangers, which does do work at weekends and during the week sometimes as well. But of course, it has to work around student schooling and beyond, because I think it's for teenagers and young adults. So it's worth perhaps looking at our website and having a look at the Youth Rangers programme and seeing if that's something that might fit into what you do. With projects like this, there may be opportunities in the future for training. So I think I'd really like to start doing some riverfly stuff around Northbrook and other brooks in Exeter as we move forward. And there'll be training involved in that, and then it becomes sort of like a solo effort, really. So there might be opportunities that we can have for doing that, for doing some training and then going to do some of the survey work. And that sometimes works as well with some of our other works that we do in Exeter. So recently I've definitely had teenagers helping with meadow surveys in Exeter, where we've offered training beforehand. So yeah, it's worth keeping it. It's worth enrolling as a volunteer with the trust, because then you'll be sent all the opportunities, keeping an eye out, but particularly showing interest in projects like this, where you might want to get involved in specific tasks, and definitely looking at the Youth Ranger project in Exeter, if that's hopefully where you are. Okay, where are we on time? We've got a few more minutes. Okay, will opportunities be looked at for promoting walking along the Northbrook? So there's great opportunities for health and well-being linked with the natural environment. Yeah, so we are talking with some great community groups around the Northbrook, aside from this project, about what communities would like to do alongside the community alongside the Northbrook, because there's a lot of there are walks already that have been done along the Northbrook, and you can find them online, where people have walked from the source to down to where it enters the River Exe. And there's communities who would like to do some more specific projects around the Northbrook, and some of those are history projects and walking projects. So there's real fantastic, hopefully, links already with communities who want to do that. And I think, yes, I mean, all of the works we'll be doing will be hopefully to enhance access as well. So really ensuring that there's opportunities to walk along this new habitat and to sort of get fully involved in it and enjoy it. There'll be and so yeah, I think it would be great if we could try and create some walking trails that connect up some of the river valleys. So there's lots of ideas there and opportunities that we can develop over in the future. Is the feasibility report available online? So the first one certainly is, I think. I'm not sure the stage 2 feasibility report is yet. I think, and so no, the first one I think is, maybe I'll try and send that round with everyone as well, but the second one isn't at the moment. Okay, next question. So very, very quickly, how can we keep up to date with progress on the Northbrook plans and wider plans overall? So we will send an email out after this and see if anyone wants to hear more. They'll also, I think, we'll include in that email an opportunity for you to sign up for the Valley Park newsletters, because that's how we've mainly been sort of keeping people abreast of progress on the project. And that so yes, so that's we'll email you that opportunity, and we'll also send an email in there so that if you want to keep in contact with me specifically or ask future questions, you can, because it'd be really good. I know there's been lots of questions there that I've not dealt with, so it'd be really good if perhaps you can send them in to me directly, and we can deal with them. And with some of it, we'll look through them, and if there's anything repeated, we'll perhaps put a few questions together in the email we send out to everybody as well, so that everyone feels like they've had their questions answered. But yes, definitely sign up to the Valley Parks newsletter if you can, because that's a great way of keeping in touch with what's going on. And I think that'll have to be the last question. But thank you all very much for coming in and joining us. It's been really interesting to hear your questions, and I hope that you found it useful and that you're as excited about this project as I am. Thank you.